They say the sea has no memory. But mine does. The ocean that tried to swallow me whole still whispers its tale to the wind, echoing across waves that once wrapped me like a coffin. Salt still stings my skin when I close my eyes. And yet I survived, not just the water, not just the betrayal, but the erasure of my very life. My name is Elena Morris. I'm 38 years old, and 1 week ago, I walked into a church filled with weeping family and friends for my own funeral. But I should start at the beginning, the day my sister Serena invited me on the cruise. She'd called, her voice unusually bright. "You've been working yourself into the ground, Elena," she said. "Let me spoil you for once. It's your birthday, and we're going to the Caribbean. Just you, me, and Derek. A proper escape." My sister had never been generous, not without reason. But something in me, some tired longing to be seen, accepted her offer without question. Derek, my husband of 12 years, smiled when I told him. "Sounds perfect," he said, kissing my forehead. Looking back, I see it all now, the glances they thought I didn't catch, the hushed voices behind half-closed doors, the tension in my gut I dismissed as fatigue. But when you've been made invisible long enough, betrayal comes not with shock, but confirmation. The cruise itself was a dream at first. Turquoise waters, linen sheets, fine wine at every meal. Serena flitted through the decks like a queen, Derek by her side more often than not. I thought nothing of it. After all, she was my sister, beautiful, untouchable Serena, the one who'd stolen spotlights and whispered backhanded compliments my whole life. And Derek, well, Derek had always looked at her a little too long, laughed a little too hard at her jokes. The night it happened, we were celebrating my birthday. July 2nd. There was a cake, candles, the whole bit. Derek toasted me, his voice warm, eyes unreadable. Serena clinked her glass to mine and said, "To the best sister in the world, may this year be the beginning of everything you deserve." I remember smiling, thinking, maybe this is her way of showing love. I didn't know it was a goodbye. Hours later, on the private balcony of our shared suite, I stood alone, watching the moon ripple across the Black Sea. Derek joined me, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "I love you," he said. And then I felt his hands move, not in tenderness, but purpose. A shove. My body collided with the railing. Serena appeared like a ghost beside him. Her voice cut through the roar of the wind. "Do it. Now." I remember the sound my body made hitting the water. Less a splash, more a slap, like God's hand against the ocean. Then silence. Salt. Darkness. Cold. I should have drowned. But I didn't. Because somewhere between betrayal and death, a fire ignited inside me. And with it, a promise. I would not let them win. When I plunged into the ocean that night, the shock stole the breath from my lungs. I didn't scream. There was no time. Water surged into my mouth, and for a few terrifying seconds, I didn't know which way was up. My limbs flailed in blind panic as waves battered me like an angry god. Above me, the cruise ship floated on an indifferent behemoth, its lights growing smaller with each second. No alarms. No splashes. No cries for help. They hadn't sounded the alert. There was no rescue effort. Because there was no accident. Serena and Derek had planned every second. But fate, that stubborn trickster, wasn't finished with me. Somewhere in the chaos, my body remembered how to move, to kick, to rise. I broke the surface, coughing salt and bile, gasping in great lungfuls of air. The moon was high, casting silver trails on the water like paths to nowhere. I screamed. And the ocean swallowed my voice. Hours passed, maybe minutes. Time was meaningless out there. I clung to debris, a piece of broken lifeboat paneling, slick and warped, but enough to keep me from slipping beneath again. Hypothermia is a quiet predator. It sneaks in under your skin, whispering lies. You're warm now. Rest. Close your eyes. I knew the signs. I'd watched enough survival shows, read enough of Derek's stupid yacht magazines to understand what my body was doing. I started talking to myself, to my sister, to my husband, to the God I wasn't sure I believed in anymore. "You tried to kill me for money," I murmured into the night. "You planned my funeral before my birthday. I promised the sea I wouldn't die out there. As the horizon began to pale with the first signs of dawn, I heard it, the faint thrum of an engine, distant but real. I didn't dare believe it. My throat was raw from screaming, but I screamed anyway. Help! Please! The fishing boat was small, a rusted thing manned by 2 older men and a teenage boy. When they pulled me aboard, I collapsed onto the deck, shivering uncontrollably, lips blue. One of them wrapped me in a stained blanket. The boy gave me water. I drank like a woman starved. They asked questions. I answered what I could. Cruise ship. Balcony. Fell, I couldn't say pushed, not yet. I couldn't form the words. They radioed the Coast Guard. The rest came in a blur. Hospitals, IVs, concerned faces, reporters kept at bay. They thought I was a miracle, a woman overboard who somehow survived a night in open water. They didn't know I was a ghost walking back to the land of the living, carrying fury in her chest. When I finally got access to the internet, the first thing I saw was the headline. Tragic birthday drowning, wife lost at sea during cruise celebration. The second was the GoFundMe. Serena had started it. For funeral costs, the description read. Elena was more than a sister, she was a light extinguished too soon. She'd raised $22,000 by the time I checked. My fingers trembled. But not with grief. With purpose. They thought I was dead. They had no idea what was coming. I stared at my own obituary. Serena had written it herself, or paid someone to. It was perfectly crafted, the kind of thing that made you cry if you didn't know better. Full of sweet lies and polished half-truths, Elena Morris, beloved wife, sister, and friend, remembered for her warmth, quiet strength, and love for the sea. Love for the sea? I nearly laughed. They hadn't just wanted me dead. They wanted to rewrite me. To carve a version of Elena the world would mourn while burying the real one beneath flowers and false memories. The hospital staff treated me like a miracle survivor, but I felt like a ghost. I couldn't go home, not yet. Not while Serena and Derek were still playing the grieving victims. The Coast Guard took my statement, and an investigation was quietly opened. But these things moved slowly, bogged down by jurisdictional confusion and legal red tape. My death had been ruled accidental. Changing that required more than suspicion. I needed proof. And time. The doctors wanted to keep me for observation. I agreed, only because the hospital gave me space, a quiet room where I could plan. On the second night, I asked the nurse for a mirror. She brought me a small one, hesitating as if unsure I was ready. I wasn't. The woman in the glass wasn't the Elena I remembered. Her face was hollowed, sunburnt, her eyes shadowed with something deeper than exhaustion. Survival leaves marks. Not just on skin, but in the way you carry yourself. I looked like a ghost. But ghosts can haunt. I reached out, touched the glass. They think I'm gone, I whispered. Let's make them wish I was. Over the next few days, I pieced together what I'd missed. My phone had gone down with me, but the world had documented my death with predictable fervor. News outlets had run glowing segments. Photos of me, smiling, posed, unaware of the knife that had already been raised, were everywhere. Derek gave a tearful interview. She was my everything, he said, voice cracking on cue. We were celebrating her life. I never thought it would end like this. He wore my wedding ring on a chain around his neck. The same ring I'd taken off that night before stepping out onto the balcony, a habit I'd picked up to keep it from slipping off in the sea breeze. He must have added that detail himself. A convenient prop. My sister, meanwhile, had transformed into a symbol of grief-stricken elegance. Her social media was a curated tribute, black and white photos, poems about loss, shots of her standing by the railing of the cruise ship like some melancholic widow. They were playing their parts perfectly. But they'd overlooked one thing. Me. By the end of the week, the hospital reluctantly discharged me. I walked out wearing clothes donated by a local shelter, faded jeans, a hoodie with a missing drawstring, and tennis shoes a size too big. I looked like someone no one would look at twice. Perfect. The doctor handed me a folder of discharge papers and said, "You've been given a second chance. Use it wisely." I almost told him this wasn't a second chance, it was a declaration of war. They'd robbed me of everything: my marriage, my reputation, my name. So I started with a new one. At a motel off the Florida coast, I became Elise Monroe. The name didn't feel like mine, not at first. But it gave me space to breathe, to disappear into the background while I plotted my return. A local tech at the library helped me recover some of my digital life: email accounts, cloud backups, security footage I'd stored from home without ever thinking I'd need it. There was a video I'd saved months ago, a short, silent clip from our home security cam. Derek in the kitchen, whispering on the phone. I had always thought he was planning something romantic. Now, when I enhanced the audio and slowed the playback, I caught 3 words. Serena can't know. Funny. I bet she said the same about him. The hardest part wasn't gathering intel. It was resisting the urge to go to the police with what I knew. But the truth is, they needed more than hints. More than my story. They needed a smoking gun. And I needed them to sweat. I started by contacting a former coworker of Derek's, a woman named Melanie who'd once confessed, tipsy at a company holiday party, that she thought Derek was too smooth to be honest. Melanie remembered me. "Oh my God, Elena? You're alive. Let's keep that between us," I said. "For now." I told her just enough to get her interest, hinted at financial fraud, life insurance policies, strange behavior. Derek had always been careless with bragging. He'd probably told her something over drinks he shouldn't have. He had. "Wait," Melanie said slowly. "Didn't he take out a life insurance policy on you last year? Something huge." He joked about it, said he was sitting on $7 million and didn't even need to win the lottery. My blood ran cold. There it was. I asked her to write it down, every word she remembered. Dates, jokes, exact phrasing. She agreed. With her testimony, my digital archive, and my silence, I had leverage. Now I just needed timing. They were planning a memorial. The final one. Bigger than the funeral. Serena's idea, of course, a celebration of life gala at a country estate in Maine. Black tie. Champagne. News coverage. A swan song. The perfect stage. I RSVP'd anonymously. Told them to expect a special guest. Someone whose name would be unforgettable. Then I went shopping. The thrift store in Miami's Little Havana didn't look like much, but it gave me everything I needed. A black gown with subtle shimmer, a pair of heels that pinched just enough to keep me grounded, and a vintage clutch with a broken clasp, one that reminded me not everything has to be perfect to carry something valuable. I was dressing for a funeral, mine. But this time, I'd be in attendance. I'd learned through quiet digging that Derek had already begun the claims process for the life insurance policy. $7 million. Enough to erase whatever conscience he might have once had. And Serena? She was living like a widow, dramatic silk scarves, grief-stricken Instagram posts, and invitations to speak about loss at women's empowerment panels. They weren't just profiting off my death. They were thriving. I called the insurance company anonymously. I posed as an investigator, requested verification of the claim, and asked when it would clear. They gave a vague but telling answer, pending final memorial and a few last procedural checks. Perfect. The gala was their final step. They'd already sold the lie. Now they were about to cash in. I spent the night before the event in a quiet rental cottage by the sea, a place with no internet, no TV, no distractions. I needed clarity. I needed to become steel. At sunrise, I walked along the beach. The water kissed my toes, and for a moment, the same sea that had nearly claimed me felt like a co-conspirator. It had given me back to the world not whole, but sharpened. And I would not waste the gift. Back at the cottage, I printed the documents Melanie had sent, her sworn statement, dated and signed. I printed screenshots of the GoFundMe withdrawals, the text Serena had accidentally sent to a mutual friend thinking it was her boyfriend. "It's almost over. $7 million, sis. Can you believe it?" I printed the receipts. All of them. I placed everything into the vintage clutch. And then I looked in the mirror. The woman staring back wasn't Elena Morris anymore. She was the storm Serena and Derek had never seen coming. She wasn't crying. She wasn't broken. She was reborn. That evening, I arrived at the estate 10 minutes before the ceremony began. The sky was heavy with dusk. Security was light, too confident in the guest list. I handed the envelope to the woman at the door. Please give this to Mr. Morris and Ms. Ellis after the speeches. She nodded, distracted by the stream of mourners behind me. I slipped inside. The room was opulent, full of white lilies and soft lighting, wine glasses clinking in delicate fingers. I stayed at the back unnoticed. The slideshow began. Photos of my childhood, my wedding, candid moments I didn't know were captured, all curated to sell a tragedy. Then Serena took the mic. She was flawless in a floor-length gown, tears delicately glimmering in her eyes. Elena is everything I ever wanted to be. Losing her broke something in me. Derek stood beside her, solemn, supportive, his arm wrapped protectively around her waist. I watched his thumb stroke her side. That was enough. I stepped forward. The gasps began slowly. A ripple through the crowd, growing louder with each step I took toward the stage. Serena looked up. Derek turned. And the moment their eyes met mine, the color drained from their faces. The dead woman had come home. For one breathless moment, the room froze. Wine glasses stilled midair. Conversations halted. Somewhere in the back, someone whispered, "Is that?" But most didn't finish their thought. They didn't need to. The dead don't walk into their own memorials, not unless they're there to haunt. I didn't speak at first. I let them look. Let them see me. Derek's hand dropped from Serena's waist like it had been burned. She stepped back, swaying, one trembling hand catching the edge of the podium. Her lips moved, but no sound came. "Elena," someone asked, a guest in the front row. An older woman I didn't recognize, but who had enough empathy to look shocked, not horrified. "Hello, everyone," I said calmly, my voice threading through the stunned silence. "Sorry I'm late. It's been a journey." The crowd erupted. A mixture of gasps, shouts, camera flashes, and one person who actually screamed. Phones were already out. Someone knocked over a champagne flute. Serena's face had gone sheet white, her carefully painted lips parted in disbelief. Derek took a shaky step forward. "Elena, what? How?" "Alive," I interrupted, voice steady. "That's how." He looked as though he might faint. I would have savored it more if I wasn't focused on what came next. Security moved toward me. I raised a hand. "I wouldn't do that. There are cameras. Plenty of witnesses. Let's not add salt to the list of your problems." Serena's voice finally returned, shrill, cracking. "You're supposed to be dead." There it was. Not relief. Not joy. Not even confusion. Just rage that her plan had failed. A man in the audience, someone with a camera crew, pushed forward. "Elena, can you explain where you've been? Were you rescued? What happened?" I ignored him. I stepped onto the stage and handed the vintage clutch to a stunned reporter with a press badge. "You might want to look through these. Insurance fraud, attempted murder, a lovely little GoFundMe scam. Should make for a compelling lead." The envelope was thick, heavy with truth. Then I turned to Serena and Derek. "I nearly drowned," I said softly, so only they could hear. "And the last thing I saw before I hit the water was the two of you smiling." Derek flinched. Serena hissed, "You can't prove." "Try me," I whispered. The room behind us exploded with questions, flashes, voices. I turned away, letting the sound rise like waves behind me. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't the one drowning. I was the storm. Police arrived 20 minutes after I handed over the clutch. Apparently, someone had tipped them off anonymously. I would have smiled if my jaw hadn't been so tightly clenched. Truth has a way of arriving when it's inconvenient for the guilty. Serena and Derek tried to keep their composure, the perfect grieving duo suddenly surrounded by flashing badges and calm, methodical voices. But under scrutiny, their cracks began to show. One officer took my arm gently. "Ma'am, are you saying you were pushed overboard?" I nodded once. "By the man standing next to my sister." And yes, they both planned it. Derek protested. "This is insane. She must have hit her head." She's confused." But the officer was already flipping through the documents from my clutch. His eyes narrowed as he read Serena's message about the $7 million. I could see the moment doubt turned to suspicion. "I'm going to need you both to come with me," he said. The guests watched in stunned silence as the golden couple of grief was quietly escorted out, no longer radiant with tragedy, just small, twitching creatures trapped in the light. The memorial ended abruptly. I stood alone on the stage, staring out at the sea of stunned faces. Someone tried to approach me, but I wasn't ready to speak. I left through a side exit, the cool night air hitting me like freedom. Outside, I exhaled for the first time in what felt like years. A black SUV waited by the curb, Melanie behind the wheel, engine running. She rolled down the window. "Need a ride, ghost girl?" I slid in without a word. For a while, we drove in silence. Through Maine's twisting roads, past pine forests and moonlit lakes. Then she spoke. "You were incredible." "No," I said. "I was alive. That's all." And that was enough. We pulled into a roadside diner an hour later. I hadn't eaten all day. As I sipped coffee and pushed pancakes around a plate, I stared at my reflection in the window. Still here. Still breathing. Not just alive, but seen. Melanie looked up from her phone. The news already hit the feeds. They're calling it the funeral that backfired. "You're trending, Elena." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But I did know this. The real story was just beginning. By morning, my face was everywhere. Not the old portraits from the cruise, not the staged smiles from social media, but new ones. Me on the stage, fire in my eyes, as I confronted the people who tried to erase me. Headlines screamed. "Woman returns from the dead to expose sister and husband's murder plot." Elena Morris, the wife who walked into her own funeral. And the most gutting one of all. $7 million motive, greed, blood, and betrayal. I watched it all unfold from Melanie's couch, wrapped in one of her fleece blankets that smelled faintly of peppermint and dog hair. Her apartment was modest, cluttered, lived in, safe. I hadn't felt that way in a long time. She made coffee. I couldn't stomach food yet. "You're a household name now," she said, handing me the mug. "You should see Twitter. You've got people cheering, crying, writing poetry. Some are calling you the Phoenix Widow." I snorted. "I'm not a phoenix." She tilted her head. "You sure? Because you were dead. And now." I shook my head. "Now I have to decide what comes next. Because the truth is, survival isn't a finish line. It's the starting gun for a race you didn't ask to run." The legal team I'd connected with pro bono, high profile, called to confirm Serena and Derek were in custody. Bail was denied. The prosecutors had moved swiftly, spurred by the media frenzy and the strength of the evidence I'd provided. Still, I knew the real trial wouldn't happen in the courtroom. It would be in the quiet moments, the days when the trauma returned like a tide, pulling me under again. The nights when I heard Serena's laugh echoing through my dreams, or Derek's hands around my shoulders just before they shoved. I would relive it. But this time, I wouldn't drown. Later that afternoon, I stood at the edge of the Atlantic, the same sea that had tried to claim me. I scattered something into the waves, not ashes, but pages from an old journal. Things I'd written about my marriage, my sister, my hope. Let the ocean keep those lies. Let it carry them far from me. I wasn't looking for revenge anymore. I was building something new from the wreckage, yes, but also from the fire. The media wanted interviews, book deals, streaming rights. They called it a story too wild to be real. But I didn't want to be someone's headline. I didn't want to be remembered for the worst thing that had happened to me or for the worst people I'd ever loved. So I stayed quiet. For a week, I stayed in Melanie's spare room, a small space filled with hand-me-down furniture and warm, golden light that crept in through crooked blinds. It was the first time in years that I felt untethered, but not lost. She never asked questions she didn't need answered. She brought me tea instead of sympathy. "I know it's hard," she said once, curling into the opposite corner of the couch while we watched old movies with the volume low. "Letting people in again. It's not just that," I murmured. "It's that my whole life, the life I thought I had, was a lie. The house, the marriage, the sisterhood, it was all built on sand." "So build again," she said. "This time, lay bricks. Simple. Direct. And utterly terrifying." The next morning, I opened a fresh notebook and wrote one sentence at the top. I am not who they buried. Then I made a list. Not of revenge. Not of grief. But of things I wanted for myself. A small cottage by the water, but far from cruise ships. A dog with big ears and a bigger heart. A job that used my voice. A life that was mine, and mine alone. The world thought it knew me now. But it didn't. I wasn't a symbol. I wasn't a phoenix. I wasn't a hashtag. I was a woman who had once been loved, or thought she was, and then thrown away like driftwood. But even driftwood survives. It shapes into something stronger, smoother. Something capable of floating forever. I'd do more than survive this. I'd rise not in fire, but in truth. Because now, the house I would build wouldn't have walls that hid secrets. It would have windows full of light. Sleep returned slowly. At first, it came in fractured pieces, an hour here, a half-dose there. I jolt awake with the feel of water in my lungs, Serena's voice echoing in my head like a wave crashing against glass. Do it. Now. I tried not to hate her. Not because she didn't deserve it, but because hatred was just another chain, and I was already dragging enough weight. Instead, I unpacked what she'd taken from me piece by piece. Not just the physical, though the list was long, my home, my photos, the ring I'd worn for over a decade. No, the worst thefts were quieter. Intimacy. Trust. Memory. I thought back to when we were children. Serena and I used to lie under the covers with a flashlight between us, whispering stories into the night. She'd braid my hair and tell me she'd protect me forever. She gave me her half of a best friend necklace when we were 9, a cheap plastic thing, but precious. I'd found it in a drawer the week before the cruise while packing. And I'd worn it. She must have seen it, around my neck the night she smiled and watched me fall. How long had she been planning it? Did she remember that necklace when she ordered the cake? Did she hesitate when I hugged her before bed? Did she whisper goodbye in her head? I'll never know. What I do know is this. Betrayal doesn't start at the moment the knife goes in. It starts earlier, in the tiny compromises, the silent calculations. The first time someone decides your life is worth less than their ambition. But I wasn't her stepping stone. I was her reckoning. The following day, I met with the district attorney. My testimony would soon be formally recorded. There'd be hearings. Trials. The slow churn of justice. But they already knew the truth. The weight of the evidence couldn't be ignored. Insurance fraud. Attempted murder. Conspiracy. And above all, intention. She knew you couldn't swim, the DA asked gently. I nodded. That was the part that made it murder. That and the fact that neither of them had ever looked back. The press dubbed it the perfect murder that wasn't. True crime podcasts dissected every detail. TikTok flooded with theories, timelines, makeup tutorials tagged #ElenaLives. Everyone wanted a piece of it, of me, but none of them knew what it truly meant to fall into silence and climb back out. The real story wasn't about how I survived. It was about what I did after. The prosecutor handling the case, a sharp-eyed woman named Daria Chin, met me at a secured office on the edge of town. She greeted me with a hand that felt firm and unshakable. Elena, she said gently, you're not just a witness. You're ground zero. We reviewed every document, every photo, every message that had passed between Derek and Serena and the ones they thought would never surface. Melanie's testimony, the life insurance timeline, the cruise ship's passenger logs. Derek had claimed I was drinking that night. That I slipped. But there were no reports of alcohol in my system. No witnesses to a stumble. Just silence. And silence, as it turned out, was their greatest mistake. Too clean. Too curated. They underestimated how loud the truth can be when it finally speaks. We'll move quickly, Daria said. They're lawyered up. But so are we. I nodded, though my chest tightened. It wasn't fear. Not exactly. It was gravity, the pull of what it meant to publicly relive the moment you realized the people you loved most wanted you dead. Melanie offered to come with me to the first formal deposition. I've got nothing else to do, she shrugged, but her eyes were warm. You don't have to. Don't say that, she interrupted. No one should face that room alone. So we went. The courthouse smelled of dust and old paper. I sat in a glass-walled room, flanked by lawyers, facing two people who once knew how I took my coffee and how I hummed when nervous. Now, they looked like strangers in borrowed skin. Serena wouldn't meet my eyes. Derek did, and quickly looked away. I gave my statement. Clear. Steady. No tears. I laid out the moments, the movements, the silence after the splash. I described the look in Serena's eyes. I repeated her words. I told them about the GoFundMe, the insurance claim, the party they threw before my body was cold. After I finished, the court reporter paused. "Do you need a break?" she asked softly. "No," I replied, because I wasn't the one breaking anymore. The day after the deposition, I walked by my old house. Not to go in, that chapter was sealed shut, but just to see it, to confront the place where so many lies had been neatly arranged like throw pillows. It looked the same, yet smaller. Houses always do once you've outgrown what they represent. The lawn had been freshly mowed. The curtains I picked were still hanging. A delivery box sat on the porch, and for a moment I wondered if it was for Serena. That thought stopped me cold. There had been a time, not long ago, when we shared everything. Inside jokes, vacation plans, secret frustrations about our parents. And then, beneath all that, something else had grown. A darker root, twisting in the shadow of my love for her. Envy. She used to joke that I won the life lottery by marrying Derek. What she never said out loud was how much she resented not being chosen. Or maybe she didn't resent it, maybe she just decided to take what she felt she deserved. I didn't knock. I didn't walk up to the porch. I just stood across the street, arms folded, watching as the ghost of my old life played house inside those walls. When I turned to leave, a voice called out from behind me. "Elena." I froze. Mrs. Trask. My old neighbor. She stood on her steps, clutching a grocery bag, eyes wide with disbelief. "Oh my God. I thought you were," her voice caught, and she shook her head. "The news. The memorial." I left flowers." I nodded slowly. "I know. Thank you." Her eyes welled with tears. "Is it true?" "They tried to." "It's true," I said softly. "But I'm here." She put a hand to her chest. "You always seemed like the strong one. But this? Elena, this is biblical." I smiled faintly. "No, just human." And I meant it. Betrayal wasn't reserved for myths or scripture. It wore the faces of people who hugged you in the morning and planned your funeral by night. I left Mrs. Trask standing there, stunned. I didn't look back at the house. That wasn't my home anymore. My home would be the one I built with my own hands. No secrets, no schemes, and no one standing behind me with a knife. Back at Melanie's apartment, something had changed. Not in the space, it was still cozy, still cluttered with plants that leaned toward whatever sliver of light they could find. But in me, my mind was quieter, like the eye of a storm that had finally found its center. I took a long shower. Let the steam fog the mirror, soften my edges. Then I pulled out a notebook and made a new list, not of what I'd lost, but what I would claim. A lawyer of my own. Not court-appointed. Not public interest. Mine. A statement to the press, my version. Not the viral narrative. And most urgently, a will. Yes, I was 38, healthy, newly reborn, but I had seen firsthand what happens when people assume they have forever. I met with a lawyer 2 days later. He was young, sharp, and visibly starstruck. "Miss Morris," he said, offering me water I didn't take. "It's an honor." "I read your story in The Atlantic." "Then you know why I need everything airtight," I replied. "I want to make sure no one ever has access to anything of mine again without my written blessing. Especially not a sister." He flinched but nodded. "We'll make it bulletproof." Good. Melanie sat with me that night while I drafted the rough outline of what I wanted. No more shared accounts. No more cosigners. No more assuming love means protection, I said. She glanced up. "You're burning the old life down." I smiled, the first real one in days. Some things don't need rebuilding. They need fire. And so, I lit the match, not out of rage, but resolve. I contacted every institution that had once had Derek's name connected to mine. The bank, our mortgage, credit cards, even the streaming services. One by one, I scrubbed the record clean. The past wasn't erased, but I would not carry it forward. By the end of the week, I owned nothing jointly with anyone. Not a house. Not a debt. Not even a memory I hadn't chosen to keep.